Patrick Donohue. I met you through my associates with Success Authorities, Peter Beaumont and Ron Lehman. We did an interview with you a few weeks ago and spoke more specifically on elements of what's valuable in businesses. And a lot of that is not necessarily the kind of thing you see on a line item, but it nonetheless has an impact. And we're going to delve deeper in this, if I understand you correctly, when it comes to magnetic vision. You are a financial expert. Are the owner of Hill Capital Corporation. You have chosen your path in investing in small to medium-sized businesses. I'm extremely interested in finding out what was the inspiration for that. And now you are an author and speaker as well, so that you're imparting your knowledge onto the rest of us, and we're very grateful.
Well, likewise. Thank you, Linda. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here. I always just I love that this is a smaller group because this is the type of thing I like to do where it's very interactive. And since it is a smaller group, I'd be very grateful if we could all just kind of go around. And I know like a couple of people, their audio might not work and so forth, but when I would love to just know your name and a little bit about you, and so far as like background, but specifically as it ties to why you're here today. It's always important to me that, we're investing our resources. Our most valuable asset is our time, and you're investing your time to be here today. So I'm curious why you chose to spend this hour together, and what you would hope to get out of today's conversation. And that will really help guide me in some of the things I would like to share with you today. So maybe with that, maybe Claudia and Bill, if your audio works, maybe you could start there and we could go around the room. And if your audio doesn't work, maybe Linda could chime in if she knows you guys.
Uh, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay,
Perfect.
great. All right, it's
Yeah.
working. Okay. Um, Bill and I, we have Sweet Abode Artisan Soap, and for 11 years, we've been creating handcrafted bath, body, and home products. And I work with Linda through the NSA. Excuse me. And Bill is the production. Bill is our production manager for the business.
Okay.
So I'm always up for new ideas. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. Thank you for the background. I appreciate it. And and then I believe John, it says owner, but I believe that's John.
Yeah, that's John. John's moved to the Asheville area a couple years ago after running a successful personal training business for approximately 25 years in the Twin Cities area, and moved here just kind of like reducing the amount of work I do, and maybe still pick up a few clients in personal training and share some of my valuable time here with Linda.
Excellent. And John, what were you hoping to get out of today yeah, what would be valuable for you?
Hearing what you have to say
Okay.
and seeing if it applies to anything that's going on in my aspect of my life at this particular time.
Awesome. Yeah. Good, good, good. Well, thank you for being here. And then Christy, are
My
you
pleasure.
yeah. Christy, are you available to say hello?
Excuse me. Yes, I'm here. I am working. I help businesses with their insurance programs in the Asheville area. And so I saw the invite from Linda and thought I would at least listen in and just look to hear from you of how you were able to create business success for yourself and how I might be able to apply that in my world.
Awesome. Cool. I appreciate you being here. And then it looks like Laura. Laura, are you available to say hello?
Yeah, hi. My hair's still wet. Sorry, guys. Yes, I work with Mosaic Business Consulting, and I work with women and BIPOC small business owners and entrepreneurs, and in particular service providers. But I try to help with business planning. And I also find that there are business owners that are smart and want to think about the end result first and
Mm.
keep that in mind. And so I'm always looking at the succession plan potentially to see how they may want to leave. And so I'm interested in learning with your business how it might be able to help some of my clientele. So
That is awesome. Well, thank you everyone for taking a minute to share a bit of background. As I mentioned, it's always really valuable to really understand where kind of everyone's coming from, and so we can address some of the things that might be helpful for you. So I'm going to just start by giving a little bit of background, and then we'll get into a conversation. I'll share with you some tools that I've put together to help with my own personal visions and so forth. And so. But just to kind of take a step back to kind of set the stage, there's one day in my life I'll never forget, and that's March 19th, 2017. And it was the day I nearly gave up, but it was also the day that I chose to keep going. So let me explain how I got there. My career all started in finance. I was working on mergers and acquisitions, valuation work, doing stock analysis, and capital formation for private and public companies. The work is complex and intellectually rewarding. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. But there was a point in time, a day that stuck with me doing that work, and it was when I was helping take a company public. And it was an IPO in a company that I didn't believe in. And that's when I realized that my work was not always aligning with my personal values. And so in 2013, I was able to go out on my own, and I was starting to have some conversations with people to really think through how to build a better world around finance. Because it had been in me for a long time that I had wanted to create a better fund, a better way to provide capital to entrepreneurs that were building and growing. And so I started having conversations with people, and that original vision I had started to come together. And so in doing that, I just wanted to really help the gritty entrepreneurs that were building something lasting. I wasn't so interested in the boom and bust startup world, where it goes big or goes home. And again, I just really admired the founders that really were gritty. So my vision to organize this venture fund with investors that offered something different, something flexible, that was really working with the entrepreneurs and to help them through the good times and the bad times, especially those founders that were doing something very different other than the traditional Silicon Valley script. And so in early 2014, I sat down with a couple of people and we started ideating a new concept, a bold idea for a new fund. And so by later that year, we were all in. We put $200,000 of our own money into a checking account. And I set out over the next 4.5 years to build a firm from the ground up. We'd given the project 30 months to get off the ground. But by early 2017, I was making some headway. I had made 4,600 contacts, had over 1,000 conversations, had hundreds of meetings, and I lined up 74 investors. But I was burned out. I was drained. I was drained emotionally, mentally, and financially. And on March 19th, 2017, on that day, is when I nearly gave up. And not only did I nearly give up on my vision, I nearly gave up on myself. Now, that day is important to me because that was the day, it was the anniversary, the 27th anniversary of my father's passing. I had just turned 40 years old, and my mother had dementia for several years, and it was taking a massive toll on me and my family. It was taking every free moment I possibly had. And my kids were 5, 7, and 11, the exact ages where they needed their dad to be fully present. One of my first teammates at Hill Capital Corporation, Austin, was reading a book and quoting it quite often called The Daily Stoic, and I had taken his cue. And thankfully, on March 19th, I had read the passage that day. And in that passage, there was a quote from Anthony DeMello. And it said, "The cause of my irritation is not in this person, but in me." And I learned through that whole passage that we label things. We make judgments on things. I had labeled myself a failure. I had labeled my vision as a massive mistake. And I realized that I had to change the narrative. And I'd labeled myself a massive failure. But no one else labeled me that. I did. And I had to change the story. And so I did. And so that's when, in the following days, I had started to really work on myself and to really lean in and to work on my mentally where I was at with my beliefs, where I was with my resilience. And slowly, in keeping my vision in mind, I had continued to work through the grind of life. And so in October of 2017, we had a critical board meeting to wind down Hill Capital. Despite having 74 investors lined up, we had failed to hit the mark to raise $20 million for our fund. And I was ready. But I had gone on to that meeting and shared with my fellow shareholders a vision and a case to keep going. And they agreed. And over the course of the next year, by October of 2018, we raised the fund. And today, we've now invested $12.6 million in 16 transactions. But when we had that board meeting is when I leaned into my vision. I leaned in hard into what I saw and knew Hill Capital could be. Because by then it had become way more than an idea. It had been something that I was believing in with my whole being. And it became magnetic. It's the thing that provides personal clarity to you. And it's also the thing that draws resources to you to make your vision a reality. And that's when I started to realize the impact of a magnetic vision. And so today, that vision is expanding. And so we're now setting out to invest in over 500 companies, over $1 billion by the year 2040. And it's to prove that innovation happens everywhere, including the bold innovators on Main Street that defy the Silicon Valley script. Because we set out to create something different, to put together a fund that invests in and supports entrepreneurs in a better way. I like to think of it as relationship-based capital. And that's what we are setting out to do in a big way. And so what I've learned through all of that is that you don't need to wait for others to validate your vision. When you believe in your vision deeply and you share it boldly, it becomes the light that absolutely guides you through the darkest moments, like it did for me. And that's when I've started to realize that's what makes a magnetic vision, what I like to think about today as a breakout vision. And that's what saw me through the hard times. And that's what today I'm building my life around. And so that gives you some of the context to where I've been, what I've been through to be here today, to be able to share the things that I want to talk about with you today. And so before I dive into sharing some things, I think I'll just take a pause here and to see if you have any thoughts or questions or feedback on your own visions and what you've been through.
Claudia, I think from what I've heard Patrick say this morning, it almost sounds parallel to some of the things I've heard from you. Would you agree?
I would agree. I wanted to just sort of, I I have an idea what the Silicon Valley template or whatever it is, and I just wanted to clarify what that was. In I'm absolutely excited about this talk because it does parallel with what I talk about and what I believe.
Yeah, so what I'm referencing is that, we're really investing in companies that are, they're the innovators on Main Street and they're defying, I like to say it is, they're defying the Silicon Valley script. And the Silicon Valley script is kind of, I think of it as kind of like boom or bust. It's like this whole like, I'm going to go and be $1 billion thing, or I'm going to shut this down and go work on the next thing.
Go big or go
Whereas
home?
what I do in my core, because what I've done is I'm a grinder. I love founders who are grinding through and really doing the hard things and have the vision for what they want to accomplish long term.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I'm in my talk that I'm giving her an essay, it talks about that the struggle that I had with creating my vision because, you know, everybody wanted it to be really big. Well, Bill and I are at retirement age and we just want enough money when we have daggum trees fall on the house. So for us, it wasn't building an empire. It was adding income to, you know, what we already had. And it would keep our butts out of the lazy butt chairs. And I just needed the stimulation of being with really cool people. And I feel that entrepreneurs are the only place to be. They have visions, they have drive, they make things happen. So it's like I could never retire because I'd lose all my friends. I love being around entrepreneurs and I love what I'm doing, but I don't want to carry it where I'm in 50 states and cranking out 2,000 bars of soap a day. That's not my idea of a good time.
Yeah, exactly. And I applaud you for that because that's where I think a lot of media society really misses the mark. There's this whole idea that as an entrepreneur, there's, kind of this scripted hero's journey that somebody's got to go like really big and create something like big and fanciful. Well, that's not 99% of our economy. The vast
Right.
majority of our economy are the people that are showing up every day and working on something that's important to them and doing it for their purposes. It's not about, the need to create the next $1 billion thing.
Yeah, and I think that what I'm crafting is sort of a blueprint. There are a lot of people like me, and I think that it's absolutely necessary for them to have the business acumen to do that. I mean, you've got the little crafters that they make a bar of soap and they throw it on the table. They know nothing about financing. They know nothing about business. They know nothing about advertising. And if we can give those tools, um, there's no telling what they can do. Because I know some of them would like to have soap in all 50 states, and I know a lot of them do.
Right.
I have one friend that she makes all the bath bombs for Disney. And it was like she started out like me. She's much younger, and her vision and my vision are much different. But I know people that are succeeding in this business, and like I say, for some people, that's what they want to do. For me, I just want to pay for the tree cutters.
And that's what I've come to realize, what you said there just resonated with me, but it's your vision. You need to have your vision work for you and what you're looking to achieve.
Right.
And there's the trifecta of business, personal, and family. And we'll touch upon that in a little bit. But those, and that's only what, and that's what's important to you. And no one else can dictate your vision. And that's why what I've come to realize is that, you know, even if people don't validate your vision or you don't find them validating your vision, it doesn't matter. It's all about you leaning into your vision and creating it. And over time, that's why I've come to love the term magnetic. It repels the people that don't align with it, but it attracts the people that align with it. And that's what's important.
And that's the part I feel is so fascinating is like I am surrounded that by people that encourage me and inspire me. And it's like if I just want to sell 400 soaps the next weekend, it's like, hey, yeah, you go. That's okay.
Right. Exactly. And that's what's important.
Hey, Laura, how does this compare to some of the dreams and visions and assists that you do with your clientele? Because you work with a lot of different
Oh,
business
yeah.
owners.
Well, and vision is such a critical element, I find, in talking to anybody who's going to be successful, that if there is not that alignment, it just, they don't have that same drive. They don't have that same persistence. And, and sometimes, and just for my own practice, I will say, one of the things that I focus on is saying, if they aren't aligned with my values, then I'm not going to see them as a client. And I remember working with a couple of clients, and I saw the pattern after the second time. At least, shame on me after the first one, and it was ridiculous. But the idea was, two of the business owners I worked with, when I asked them their vision, they talked about making more money. That was it. They just wanted to make more money. And it was just so antithesis to my perspective of being a part of the community or helping or somehow serving others. And so I no longer work with them. And now I really qualify people to make sure that there's an alignment with my value system, to make sure that it's going to be a good fit, because otherwise it's silly. So yeah, I don't know if that's helpful, but did you have something else in mind, Linda?
Oh, it just occurred to me that you've seen this from many different sources, and I
Oh
was
yeah.
curious to see if there was any correlation to where people were coming from with regard to their goals.
Yeah. I would say also a lot of people don't have goals. They have ideas, but they don't actually have goals for the year or goals for where they want to be. And it's through the coaching process that I'm able to talk to them and, explore that and figure out what are they saying. And so sometimes what they'll say is, oh, I have this vision of this place and all this stuff. And I'm like, well, you're not going to be able to afford a $500,000 or $1 million place site right off the bat. So let's talk about how you can get there. And then we chat about what are the steps? What would the picture look like prior to that? And does that still fit with that vision enough that they can continue to move forward? And so from my perspective, it's really about gaining awareness, I think, and clarity and awareness, if you will, clarity of what they need in order to move forward and where they are headed. But yeah, they need to gain awareness and clarity, in my perspective. Yeah.
And Laura, do you find that they're actively sharing that vision?
Well, yeah, I'm kind of lucky in that one regard. I'm
Yeah.
a former therapist and a former CEO, so the combination really lends itself to people sharing. I'm so used to people giving information, what I call word vomit for like 20 or 30 minutes straight, and then sometimes breaking down and crying and whatever they need. I'm available for that. I make that space for them because it's so critical for them to walk through it rather than feel stunted by it. And so I really try and allow for that space. Yeah.
And do you find that they're sharing their vision with others? Like, are they actively sharing their vision boldly with their family, their employees, their community?
Sometimes and sometimes not. It depends, of course, on how supportive their folks are. Like the family in particular, I find can play a big role in their ability to move forward.
Okay.
But um, yeah, I think it varies. It really does. I've seen hundreds of clients over the years, so it really varies depending on the circumstances. Yeah.
Okay. And I'm curious what limitations do they have in sharing their vision boldly with others?
Um, I would have to say every person's circumstance is unique.
Yep.
And just as an example, throughout the years of all the years that I've worked with all these clients, not any two businesses are alike.
Yeah.
And I've worked with several businesses in the soap industry, right? Or in several businesses dealing with X, whatever it might be, coaches, consultants, healthcare providers, therapists. They're all doing different things and they all have slightly different business models. They all have slightly different visions of where they want to go. Some want to grow bigger and some want to just stay small. And so I have yet to see two alike.
Okay.
I know
That
that's very vague, but that's as much as I can offer without.
Yeah, that's where, back in the day, we all have mission, vision, values. We were all taught the importance of these things, so on and so forth. And
Not
the
really.
well, that's true. I guess I'm biased because I've grown up in like, entrepreneurial like EO entrepreneurial organization and accelerator and stuff, that really espouses these things. But you're right. A good chunk of people aren't even hardly exposed to it. But when we learn about mission, vision, values, purpose, so forth, it's one thing that what I realized was is that you work on these things, but then they sit in a file somewhere and it's not actively shared. Maybe it gets on a website if people are lucky.
Yeah.
But as individuals, that's when I went through all of this 10 years ago, what I what I found out was when I shared with others my vision, that's where the magic happened. But
Your
it took a
why.
lot of courage to do it. And my first vision was not all that like courageous, if you will. It wasn't something that was, trying to end world hunger or something like that. But it was still very daunting to do so. But that's where the unlock happened, is where I actively started to share the vision and it started to attract people to it. And that's when I realized that, people may have a vision. And so there's a lot of work out there about, vision building. Like Cameron Harold's got the book Vivid Vision, and there's stuff out there about building a vision. But the problem is if people don't go out there and talk about it, they might as well not even have a vision because it doesn't matter. Because they need
Mhm.
to go out there and to share it and then it attracts the people and the resources that can help turn that vision into reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And being able to articulate um, their why, I think, is such a gift and such a necessity. And I often latch on to that why and I infuse it with their pitch, because it's critical as far as what they're trying to convey.
Right.
Patrick, we have a lot of nonprofit organizations in this area. Do you see any distinction between what you define as magnetic vision being relevant to entrepreneurial organizations versus nonprofit organizations?
I don't. I it's for me a nonprofit's just a tax status, and
Mhm.
that's where the difference ends. And so I find that the well-run nonprofits really see themselves no different than any other corporation. They just really have a different tax status. I think there's other challenges because of how ownership, and stakeholders is, but that's a whole nother subject. Um, and this isn't so much about like the vision of an organization. I think that's really important. This is really about the founder. And if it's a nonprofit, it could be the executive director or it could be the founder of the nonprofit or the founder's vision or whatever that's being carried forward. But it's really as individuals as our visions. That's what I think is really important and key.
And I'm going to throw in a quick question about something you wrote about in your breakout valuation book. And it struck me as so key because you said there are two things that move money, and I'm going to refer to money in in my translation of money is where it defines people's decisions. It's how
Mhm.
they make decisions. And you said that there are two things that move money in that book. Do you want to share with this group what that is and tell me whether or not it has anything to do with the magnetic vision that you're describing to us today?
Yeah, it all ties together. Thank you. So two things move money. It's trust and emotion.
Mm.
And that's why a magnetic vision, sharing your vision can help accelerate that. Now, emotion you can get to quickly. You can have an emotional hook. So when I'm investing in companies, I think about companies raising money and so forth. Well, I think about medical devices. If somebody's got a medical device, if they've got a new heart valve, and somebody's parents passed away from heart failure, well, they're going to have an emotional hook to that pretty quick because they like get it. They've been impacted by that. So the emotional part's pretty is easier to tie to. The trust part's hard because trust traditionally takes a really long time to build. But when somebody has a vision and they're able to communicate, you know, that vision and why it's important to them, and as Laura pointed out, their why, that helps accelerate that level of trust and it can lead to decisions much quicker. And so, yes, it's very much tied together. So I love your question, Linda.
It really, to me, pulled all the different variables that you had mentioned in breakout valuation. And again, that talks a lot about cash flow and a lot of the mechanics
Yeah.
of business. But when you added that element to it, or you started really with that element, it created this beautiful framework that said, I understand this now. Because without those two considerations, it really makes everything more or less disconnected.
Yeah, and that's why and why I'm here today is I mentioned in the book the concept of magnetic vision, and it's a very small piece. And I'm now writing a book just on this topic on vision because I've realized there's really nothing out there like what I'm speaking to. There's a lot of stuff out there about vision, but the elements of making a magnetic vision and what really allows you to break out utilizing that. And um, within the book, Breakout Valuation, the whole book is about helping entrepreneurs create a more valuable business. And it talks about all the real drivers of value. And I wrote the book because Wall Street has done a really good job of hoodwinking entrepreneurs, business owners into this concept that their business is worth some multiple of cash flow. They call it EBITDA, and that term shouldn't even exist, which is a fascinating conversation by itself. But like the business is worth a multiple of EBITDA. It's nonsensical. That's a correlation. It's not causation. What causes that business to be valuable? The people, the processes, the intellectual property, so on and so forth. And so that's what I talk about the 19 real value drivers in the book. In what you're speaking to, Linda, here is really interesting because what I also came to realize, as I got done with the book, there's only one real value driver that applies to everyone. And not only does it apply to their business, for profit or nonprofit, but more importantly, it applies to them and their families to build real value. And that's magnetic vision. When you have a vision and when you have the ability to boldly articulate where you're going and why you're going there, that drives value. Because valuation is very simple in and of itself. Valuation is just what somebody is willing today, the present value of some future value, of some future stream of cash flows, of some future sale of the business or whatever the case may be. It's a present value. Well, who gets to articulate where it's going?
Yeah.
Really only one person. That's the founder, or maybe a group of founders, but it's the person that gets to articulate where is this going? Where is this business going? Or as an individual, this applies to Rotarians, to everything we do in our lives. Where are we going as human beings? Where are we going? That's what builds value today. That's why this whole construct has become very, very important to me, because a vision that is able to be articulated boldly and that can attract the resources, that's what becomes extremely valuable.
And related to that, I've built my career over the years primarily in marketing. And as I moved along in marketing, I found so many holes in marketing were a result of some of the things that we're talking about today, that the the ability to communicate and clarify the value of the organization, as Laura mentioned, the why. I found myself more in a business advisory role and learning
Mhm.
that a business can be really great in somebody's mind, but what that picture is in that owner's mind doesn't necessarily translate into wherever their market happens to be, wherever their public happens to be. And I've grown to appreciate that the business that is today is something that somebody else can articulate back to me if I'm the owner. And I don't know how you can do that without putting in the time, the energy, and the effort into, as you described, the vision.
Exactly. Yeah, and the founder a lot of times will have a vision that's way out there. You think about like Jeff Bezos and Amazon. There's a reason why he named it Amazon. It wasn't about selling books right away. It was about selling all things. But he understood that, and that's why he was able to attract the resources that allowed him to, utilize billions of dollars of capital before Amazon was ever profitable. Now, that's a big case study, and I share that because that's something we all know and we can relate to. But I can share that same type of a story to a local coffee shop, to a ton of other things. But that owner, that founder needs to have that vision of where it's going. And what we're working on today can be foundational and it can be stair steps. Like today, I know exactly what I'm doing with Hill Capital. I know how many deals I have in the pipeline. I know my revenues. I know my expenses. I know what I have today. I kind of know what the next couple steps are going to look like. And then frankly, there's a big gray area and I know where I'm going in 2040. And that gray area is completely fine. But it's all about having the foundation and know where we're going. So we're directionally aligned with the compass to head towards where we want to go and continue to build the resources to where we want to be. And that's where this all gets really magical. Um, and with that, what I'd like to do is I just put a link in the document. I'm going to share my screen before we run out of time.
Yeah.
I'm going to share with you the resources that I have to create your magnetic vision. I'm so happy this is a smaller group today. If it was a larger group, I was going to do an exercise, but
I
you could
think
do
I
that on
scared
your own.
away a couple of them because they thought they were going to have to talk and they probably weren't
Oh,
ready to show on screen.
well, that's fine. You know, magnetic visions, it attracts and repels. So if it
Yeah.
repelled them, that's
Yeah.
just fine. It all works out. The people that needed to be here are here. So these are the resources that I will share with you. If somebody has a chance to just tell me if that works for them, I would appreciate it.
You're free to share your screen. It should work if you want to do that.
Yep, I'm going to do that right now. So I'm just going to talk you through these instead of, if it was a bigger group, what I was starting to say was I was actually going to lead everyone through an exercise because we weren't able to have this one-on-one dialogue like we're doing. So this is the worksheet that I utilize to help people craft their magnetic vision. And it's really powerful to do an exercise where you maybe put in some very light music in the background, or even better, go out in nature and to just take a time in a place to really think about a point in time. I like to think, 15 years out, 10, 15 years out, but whatever the time frame is, it doesn't matter. I like it to be well beyond 5 years. And just envision yourself in like I think of it as an office in my home. And what pictures are on the wall? What awards are on the shelf? What piece of paper do you have that's outlining the project that you're working on that you're so excited about? And to think through that. And then who comes into the room? And what do they say to you? And then they have to go. And what does that goodbye look like? And what I do with that exercise is it's really helping people kind of like unlock and to start to think about thinking about your ideal future. What does that look like? What do you want to be remembered by? What are the things that you want to achieve? So on and so forth. And then to really start to define your vision, and hopefully, the people on this call, I'm guessing, already have this, but you have a good sense of your core values. You have a sense of like what motivates you. But if you don't, start there. And then think about like how that all ties together. And then most importantly, think about how your community and those around you can support, but not only support, but amplify your vision. And then define your vision so you can literally, in a couple of sentences, be able to articulate a vision of where you're going. I'm going to invest over $1 billion in 500 companies by the year 2040. That's my vision for my business, right? And I have my personal, but what's that vision? And you might have one that's blended, but craft that and start sharing that boldly with others. And start to take note. Who does it resonate with? And as importantly, who does it not resonate with? And that's completely fine. And continue to share that vision boldly and invite others to collaborate and to contribute. And so that's this worksheet here that I'm talking you through. As you're thinking about that, I'm a big believer in tiny habits and atomic habits. BJ Fogg is tiny habits. James Clear is atomic habits, but I'm a big believer in just tiny steps. What's that next little step? So when you have that vision, just put it together and then think about what's one action you can do to move you closer to that, and who's one person you can share that vision with. And so that's how I think about creating and drafting a magnetic vision. I don't think about it as ever perfect. It can and will always change. It should be updated whenever you feel it within you. If there's an update to your vision, that's completely fine. It's not something that needs to be stagnant. This is something living and breathing. Um, when I change, I'm so used to Google Meets. When I changed, did my screen change?
Yeah, where
Does it say magnetic vision framework?
it does.
Wonderful. Okay, it's zoomed in on my whole thing. I just switched tabs. So this is the framework I utilize to craft my own magnetic vision. And if we want to talk about, I can show you some of the stuff I've personally done here. But I think about this in three realms: personal, family, and business. And so these are some of the questions, and the questions don't matter so much. You could bring your own questions in here. It's a starter. It's a starter kit. Think of it as that. It's a way to get you going. If there's one question that stands out and the rest don't, lean into that one question. But think about the things on the personal side. What does a fulfilling life look like? Claudia, I absolutely love that you understand what success means for you. What does fulfillment look like for you? It's about creating soap for your local economy. It's not about being all things to all people and scaling something national. That's beautiful. That's fulfilling to you and motivates you to wake up every morning and to create your product. And that's what's important. On your family, think about what's important to you. A lot of times, when people have kids, they're thinking about that and what could, it look like in terms of legacy, or what do relationships look like within family? What do you want to create? And then on your business or professional, so it doesn't matter, I do a lot of work with entrepreneurs and founders, but it doesn't matter if you're, whatever you're working on, it doesn't matter. If you've got a W-2 job, if you've got W-1099 income, you're doing gigs, or if you don't work, it's all about, what are the professional things that you're doing and working on? And what do you want that professional work to look like? And I think about a lot of it as impact. What are some of here, like I love this question. What's success look like beyond the financial outcome? You talked about that Laura, where you've got clients all the time that everybody thinks about, like, well, the money is the factor. Well, I think about it, money is important because we all have bills to pay and so on and so forth, but we want to have impact. Like me being here today is a great example. Like, this doesn't pay the bills, but it is super important to me to share this type of work. I am very motivated to share my work with others because this is what excites me, is to prepare and to give talks like this. And so there's some measure of success around that that's super important. Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Well, I was kind of curious, what do you do when you're so focused on impact, you're not focused enough on the money?
I've come to believe and appreciate, and everybody has to find their own balance. But for me, I've come to believe in karma. I've come to believe in that everything happens for a purpose and that things will naturally come together. So when I lean into impact, like when I went to Rotary this morning and when I go volunteer, those moments I will find over the last 30 years, I'll find like moments like that where I volunteer and I did something will come back because of a person I met at Rotary or doing volunteer work. It'll come back and all of a sudden something will happen that will lead to a financial outcome. I can't really define that, but that's what I've come to believe, is that it all really works out. So I don't get too hung up on, like, I can only allocate 5 hours a week to impact or volunteering and so forth. I find the personal blend where my life and my personal and my business life, and family, it blends together. Is how I think about it. And then, so the final part of this framework is the unifying questions that kind of allows you to, like, tie all these together. What's the bigger story that I'm a part of? You know, how do all these things reinforce each other? So this is where I've gotten to, Laura. like where do all these things tie together and to reinforce each other? Where, what I do minute to minute, it's all building upon itself. And so for me, let's see. Oh, maybe I can do it this way. Did my screen share, did my screen change again? You
It's
see me scroll?
scrolling up.
Okay. So, so when I've worked through this, I've answered all these questions, and what I love is, um, you may recognize the formatting. I utilize ChatGPT quite a bit, in that I'll go in and like work through these and refine things that'll help, like like ask me a question in a different way or whatever the case may be. So before ChatGPT, I already had my vision. I had all this type of work done, and I've been going back and putting it in GPT. And so I had it kind of kick back to me a magnetic vision statement, which is fascinating because it's worded a bit differently, but it's basically the same thing. It probably just has better grammar than I would use, is the reality. But this is the vision it kicked back to me: to live with peace, strength, and purpose while inspiring entrepreneurs, my family, and myself on what's possible through clean living, deep relationships, and impactful investing. I aim to build a future where risk takers have clarity, access, and the tools to create lasting value physically, emotionally, and financially. And so for me, it's a bit wordy. I'm not going to go spit that out to somebody. So I'm going to probably go say it the way I used to say it. But it's been really helpful to really kind of utilize these new online tools to help work through this and to help get moments of clarity, because words can matter. Uh, a lot of my work, what I do investing in companies and so on and so forth, there's nuances, but they're really important nuances to what we do. And so uh, it is important to, I do think about in every week, I have a personal vision traction organizer that I work through, and I look at all of my mission, vision, values, and I look at all of these things and where I'm at, and I revisit these things and I update them regularly. And that's what I wanted to leave you with, is that um, I would encourage anyone and everyone to do this type of work, this deep work, and to not try to eat the elephant. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. But it's doing it day to day, week to week. It's not about just, crushing this over the course of a couple hours. That doesn't matter. It wouldn't matter if you did this a couple hours and you put it to the side. Who cares? It's about building it into the daily activities of what you're doing and constantly revisiting it. And that's where I have personally found it becomes very, very, very powerful. And so I would encourage all of you to utilize your vision wherever possible. And as importantly, where appropriate, encourage others to identify and to boldly articulate their vision, because it helps build personal value.
It's hugely important, Patrick, and I thank you for your information on this. I think of a couple of business organizations I'm part of, and one of them in particular has been around for close to 30 years. The business owners are by and large very well established, but one of the things that I've been asking them to do lately is to communicate who they are and what they do, with a little bit of explanation as to what their motivation is. And it's been very difficult for them. And some of them are still needing to do it. So uh, the other piece of that is some of them have made some comments about they're going to get to it when they are working on it, in the case that when I get done with this and when things are right, then I will do it then. And I think those kind of delays just perpetuate.
Completely agree. And, that's why I probably nearly gave up on myself. And that's why it's important to lean in and to utilize this and encourage people wherever possible to just, no matter how small it is, to just articulate it and to keep thinking about where they're going and why they're going there and to continue to build upon that.
Appreciate you so much, Patrick. Does
Yes.
anybody have any questions yet while we have Patrick here for a few more seconds?
Patrick, I want to thank you. It's been so great being with you, and uh, I've got so many inspirations just from hearing you talk this morning. Thank you.
Good. Well, that means the world to me. That's why I did.